How a single networking conversation can lead you to a whole new path. I'm Greg. I'm an introverted networker. I want to share a story with you today about a networking conversation I had a couple months ago and tell you a little bit about where it led me and what I'm doing now that's new for me and is helping me with my professional development, my presence on camera, my presence on stage. And it all went back to this single networking conversation. So here's the story. You know from listening to this podcast or reading the newsletter that I'm all about making small connections and finding people you have things in common with, and then having conversations with those people to kind of get to know them better and develop professional relationships. Late last year, I was on LinkedIn and I think I was contacted by this individual, or I saw their profile and thought it was interesting. It doesn't really matter. The point was I connected with now I call a friend of mine named Gus, and Gus was commenting on some of my posts about he liked my approach to networking. And when I looked at Gus's profile, he lives about an hour and a half away from me. So he doesn't live really far away, but he's not in the same town. So close enough to potentially meet in person. But, we're not going to get together every week. And so we kind of traded some messages about getting together, having coffee. And what was interesting to me about him was when I looked at his LinkedIn profile, he said that he helps people get more comfortable through improv. So Gus is somebody who studies and does improv as a hobby. He's done it as leading groups of improv people, and he's actually gone to companies and taught them some of the principles of improv to help make their meetings better, help give people more confidence when they're speaking in front of groups. It helps people develop executive presence. So that was really interesting to me, and that wasn't the first time I'd heard somebody doing that. But I hadn't really talked to anybody who was showing companies how to do that. And in my own business, where I'm thinking about speaking in front of companies and helping them with their internal networking and their engagement and retention strategies for their employees, I thought it would be good to just share ideas about how you find companies to work with and how you're growing your business. So we set a time, we got together and we met somewhere kind of halfway in between us so that it wasn't too far of a drive for either one. And we got together and we had coffee and we just kind of talked about who we were and what we did and what our backgrounds were. And I came to find out he just moved to the area that I live in the last couple of years. He was trying to kind of get to know people and network, trying to grow this business. He has a day job where he works remotely. So he does his remote work and then he kind of works on his business on the side. And it was a great conversation. It was awesome. And so I got to know him better, told him a little bit what I was working on. We shared some ideas on some different things like how to find conferences that you might apply to speak at. But the one thing that I was really interested in was you tell me about the improv. Tell me about that thing that you do and tell me how you got into it. And so he shared his story. And I told him, I said, this is something that I've always thought of doing. I've heard of people doing this, again, to develop confidence in their speaking and their presence in front of other people and just learning in a situation where you can't always control what's being said. How do you say the next thing? And he said he recommended an improv group to me in Denver. And it's hard sometimes to find groups of people that you really know is going to be a good group to join. So having somebody refer me and say, this is a good group, I know these people, they'll do a good job, they have good classes, really helped me out, because you can get online and you can search for classes and stuff, but you really never really know, is it going to be worth your time? Is it going to be worth your money? So that's one of the powers of networking, right? Is when you're networking with people and you're talking about a topic that they know about and they can refer you, that has a lot of power in it. That has a lot of power because now I had enough of a conversation with him that I trust his judgment on this topic. And I trust him generally as well. He seems like he's a genuine person and that, he's not going to steer me wrong. But on this particular topic where he's more of an expert than I am, if he says, this is the place you need to go, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to do my own research. I don't have to go through and test out a bunch of things. I don't have to get a bunch of opinions from different people. I can. And if you're, not convinced, you should. But this is part of what you can really get out of networking, even if you're not trying to find a new job. A lot of times we're talking about getting a new job, finding a new opportunity, finding new customers. Sometimes networking is as easy as getting a referral to something that you want to do as a hobby, or a referral for a service provider, somebody that can help you out. If you're looking for like a new accountant or something, you talk to people and say like, who's your accountant? Are they good? And we often forget about that as part of networking. Now, we think about that because we say, oh, well, I've got friends that I could ask about this stuff. Sure, you can. That's absolutely not a problem. But the challenge always is, do you know people who are experts or more of an expert than you in that in that topic, right? So in this case, I knew going into this conversation, Gus knew more about improv than I did. And then when I got into the conversation, he told me more about it. And obviously I trust his judgment because he told me how he's been doing it. So he gave me that recommendation. And that really spurred me on to sign up for this class. So I signed up for Improv 101 class at this comedy group that's here in Denver. And I don't know that I would have done it if I hadn't had that conversation. I would have thought in the back of my mind, hey, I need to look that up. I need to look into that. I need to research that. But I'm not sure I would have been as motivated to click the sign up button. And I went to my first class this past week. And it was so much fun. It was a great class. It was 2.5 hours long. And none of us in the class have ever done improv before. It's a whole bunch of people who are looking to get better at thinking on their feet, at presenting. There was one person who said, I've been meaning to do this for 20 years, but I've always been afraid to. So finally just getting here is a big step for me. There was another person who said, I looked it up last night and signed up last night. So it ran the gamut of people that were there. And that not only is going to help me in terms of speaking and being on stage and being in front of people, but it's also going to help me get to know some new people. So this one conversation that I had with Gus has led me to this group of, there's 12 people in the class. So there's 11 other people that I'm connecting with who have something in common, which is they want to learn how to do improv. And now I've made those connections, and who knows where that's going to lead. And that's kind of how, again, as adults, we make connections and we start to meet new people, and we can grow our, whether it's your circle of friends or your network, however you want to do it. But it all starts with sometimes just one conversation, and then you never know where that one is going to lead. But if you're curious about another person, if you're curious about getting to know someone, even if this somebody isn't something that's going to get you a job or get you a new customer, they might have a little bit of insight that can change the path of your life. Now, I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know if I'm going to take one class. I don't know if I'm going to take more classes. This is a 6-week session, so I just started it. And I don't know if after it's over, I'm going to be like, I did it. That's great. Or if I'm going to want to do more. I have no idea where it's going to go, but it's something I've been wanting to do for a while. And it really took this sort of nudge from my network to get out of my own way and go sign up for it. So that's, when you're thinking about your networking conversations, it's not always about, can I get a new job or can I find a new customer? It might just be about, what can I learn from this person that might take me in a whole new direction? And if you kind of go into it like that, it makes it a little less stressful. It's not as much pressure on, oh, I've got to turn this into an opportunity. Maybe it's just, I'm going to learn something new today, and that's going to give me a different perspective on things. Most people aren't thinking about that when they're thinking networking, but if you're in a position where you're thinking, I need to network, I don't really love my job, I want to get a new job, I'm not in a hurry to get a new job, but at the same time, I know I probably should network. I've been reading this guy named Greg. He calls himself the introverted networker. He tells me I should always be networking before I need it. And I've heard all those things, but I can't think of a reason why. So if people were like, why are you networking? A great reason to give them is because I'm trying to learn new things and learn from new people with different perspectives. And that's a great reason. That's a great reason to connect with people. And it's also if other people, if you reach out to them and like, hey, I would love to learn more about what you do, man, that's a really low risk, non confrontational, non awkward sort of way to get into a conversation and meet somebody new. I think what I also learned from the first class of improv is something that connected with me as it relates to networking too. And you know, what you think of if you've ever been around anybody who's done improv or you've heard about improv is a lot of the main first rule is yes and. So whenever somebody says something in improv, you say yes and so that you continue the conversation and you move it forward. We all know that rule, or at least most of us have heard that rule. Or if you haven't heard that rule, now you've heard that rule and you can look into it more and find out more about what that's about. But that wasn't the main takeaway. The main takeaway I got from the class was something the instructor said, which is most people think of improv as coming up with the next thing to say. And the key to being really good at improv is listening to what the other person's saying first and really listening to what it is before you speak. If you've listened to this podcast or watched these videos or read my newsletter, you have heard me say you should always be listening first. And the reason I say that is in a conversation, the person who's doing the listening is the one who's picking up on what they can do to help the other person. And it's the same rule in improv. This is just a rule in conversation. I mean, we're applying it to improv. We're applying it to networking. It's really a rule about conversation with people. If you're the person who's going to listen more than you talk, people are going to want to talk to you. People are going to love talking to you. And as you're listening and you can help people, and again, if it goes back to improv, you're listening to help the person keep the story going. You're listening because you're like, how am I going to help this person after they stop talking, keep the story going? Now you're going to say something, right? Your gift to the improv scene is your contribution based on what the person said before you. But the idea is the same in networking. Your gift to the networking conversation is listening to what that person's working on and trying to think of how do you keep the conversation going and help them out, help them with whatever they're working on. You do those sorts of things and networking becomes a lot less awkward. It becomes a lot more fun. It becomes educational. You learn a lot more and you're going to enjoy doing it. And so, of course, I talk about networking. So everything I experience in life is going to be in the lens of networking. But it was an interesting experience this week. I'm sure I'll talk about my improv classes more in future issues as I go through this. But it really struck me, the two things were, you know, how I got there was through a networking conversation where I was just going in trying to learn about somebody else. And number two, that in that course, in that improv class, I learned that improv isn't about talking. Improv is about listening. Networking is about listening. I would say most conversation and interactions in life are about listening. It's a thing that most people don't do enough of. And I think if we all did a little more listening, we'd all have much better, less awkward relationships, and we'd feel a lot better about the connections we have. Give that a shot this week. Really focus on the listening. Think about listening. Hey, if you're interested in improv, hit me up. I can help you navigate, or I can't find a place for you if you live in a different city than I do. But if you want to know more about that, let me know. Go out this week. Try to find somebody to talk to who, you know, you can maybe learn something from. Listen to them and really see how that feels different in the conversation. Have a great week. You know what I always say, go out there and always be connecting.